Winning Plays podcast is back, and the Kevin Durant content farm is going bye-bye for fans, writers, everyone. And I had to bring Tom Westerholm of Boston.com to break down this very sad development for us in the month of August, just to have us saving us from writing about programs and other wedding pictures, anything else that would come up in the NBA sphere. We had real meaty news here for a month, Tom, and now it goes away. Kevin Durant will remain a Brooklyn Net for, it appears, the foreseeable future, but we'll get into that too.
I personally found it kind of inconsiderate of Jayson Tatum to be doing pro-ams with LeBron James while the Kevin Durant stuff was going on. Like, do that after it's resolved.
Yes.
Because Kevin Durant did us all just an unbelievable favor by giving us all this content to work with, but like, there's still a month left. Like, I could have really, we all could have really used Jayson Tatum and LeBron James playing together at the crossover, but here we are.
Well, maybe they can redo it in an air-conditioned gym so they can actually play a full game. That'll be the next step for them. But yeah, we'll cover Tatum next week in that program because we're going to need the content there. But for now, but Todd, so this is, I don't think this is a surprise where this ended up coming back to Durant. Kind of phrase it however you want. It seems like he overplayed his hand here, and Brooklyn, I'm guessing, just didn't want to trade him in the first place. And so now we're at a point where the staring match has ended and they're going to at least pretend to play nice. And whether they will, I guess my first question is, do you think this is a reconciliation that lasts? Or is this something that just is, we have no better options right now and we'll revisit this in December, whenever things will awry?
Yeah, I mean, if just guessing, obviously, but I think I'd be more likely to see it kind of falling apart after the season. It feels like this is going to this kind of, unsteady piece could like at very least carry them through another year. But yeah, I mean, I think this is going to be really hard for the Nets. Like, this is going to be just unbelievably uncomfortable. Like, I mean, even beyond, the fact that Steve Nash now has to deal with hey, your best player wanted you fired. Also, not for nothing, your second best player, who is best friends with your best player, now knows that his best friend doesn't want to play with him anymore. Like, right. Can you imagine? Like, it's going to be really, really awkward. And I mean, the Nets already last year, you were starting to see kind of the cracks in the armor there, and it's like, I don't think this is going to work. And if it doesn't work after this year, I mean, what's to stop Durant from doing it again next year when he's got another year's leverage, or the year after that, whatever it might be? Like, I don't think this is over, but I do think it worked out pretty well for the Celtics, frankly, that, now they don't have to that they don't have to kind of explain themselves so much to Jalen or anything like that. It's like, oh yes, like, see, we want to do the whole time. But I don't think this is done yet. I don't think Kevin Durant is, I don't think he magically decided that he was happy in Brooklyn. I think it's like you said, there's, both sides kind of couldn't get what they wanted here.
Right. And then you have the Kyrie factor of another person who, again, didn't get what they wanted, and they're stuck. He's stuck there for the year anyway. So he's probably like going to Kevin, like, hey, listen, man, like, I'm stuck here regardless. So why don't you just back off this, and then when I get out of here, you can push your way out next year. But yeah, the conversations with Nash, with Marks now, like, it's hard, and winning is a cure-all. So if they come out guns blazing, and I mean, we even talk about Ben Simmons, of like all these other X factors on their roster, of like, if everyone's healthy and things are looking good there, it's a top 4 team in the East easily. And that will solve a lot of problems. But if just like, again, like, I still maintain, like, if the Nets won game 1 in Boston in that series, like, I don't think that's a series that's over in 5 games. I think that's a series that, like, drags out a little bit more. But it appears like, Kyrie especially is a front running player. Durant is Durant. And so I think they're going to need some success there, I feel like, to get past any of this stuff.
And I mean, it's kind of a cousin of what would have happened if, the Celtics had like won game 2 or 3 in Milwaukee in that 2018-19, right? Where they had just like swept the Pacers, and like, they had that big inspiring win in game 1 against the Bucks. And then and that they just completely lose it. Like, yeah, Kyrie is kind of a front running player, and that puts a lot of pressure on your team, especially when you're the Nets, and now you're staring down an entire awkward season with all these guys. Like, if anything starts to go wrong, it could go off the rails very quickly, because there's been people just throwing fuel on this fire all off season. And I don't know, man, there could be some awkward locker rooms this year, I think.
All right. So we'll turn back to them in a second in the whole Eastern Conference, but let's get to the Celtics part of this. I do think, like you said, this is the Celtics were always in a situation where they were going to have the questions asked to them when Brad Stevens had it happen today, regardless, which timed out pretty well for Brad Stevens. Yeah. With the Nets and Durant kind of coming out with this joint statement saying that they're running it back together. But now there is no, I think a big part of the Celtics' success last year was the fact that there was no, at least amongst the core, like uncertainty there. Everyone had long-term deals. Everyone knew their role. They knew, they're in this for one, buying in on the bigger goal here. Now they don't have this conceivably hanging over their shoulder, even if it was a situation which, talks had died down, obviously, in recent weeks to the point where they were probably non-existent to be happening anytime soon. But now is a situation where the questions and stuff just become a lot more easier to handle now, because it's like, that's in the past. Like, why would we even talk about that?
Well, and not only that, it also means that the questions will only be like initially, right? Like it'll only happen on media day. Like there's not going to be any longer term thing, which I think the Nets are going to have a lot of questions. Like, so good luck with that, fellas.
Can we go to that media day? That'll be a fun media day.
I think this worked out really well. They're really good. Like, they're going to be fun. There's so much depth. There's like all the things that we talked about after the trade deadline, right? That everybody talks about after the trade deadline. This is a team that went to the finals, that got significantly better. That, again, like you said, didn't shake up their core. Frankly, when you talk about people knowing their roles, you bring in Kevin Durant and roles get, like, everybody up to Jayson Tatum doesn't know their role anymore. Like it's a completely different team, and that's really hard. You come back to the season with pretty much the same team as last year with a couple extra bench guys. The only guy who might not know his role is like Derek White. And like Derek White's good and he's a useful player, but like if Derek White is the guy who's trying to find himself on your roster, like you can probably be okay. If Jayson Tatum is the guy trying to find himself on your roster, I don't know. Like that's a much kind of bigger piece there. So I think this is really good for the Celtics, I think, frankly. Like it simplifies everything. Kevin Durant didn't go to one of your direct contenders. He goes to the team that, like, I agree with you that it was closer than a sweep, but they still outclassed that team, last season. And the pieces that the Nets are bringing back are tough to integrate anyway. So, like, if you're the Celtics, I think you're feeling really good. And that's why you had so much leverage in the first place, is because you didn't have to go get Kevin Durant. You were still going to be really good with or without him. Exactly.
And you're always, any kind of talks you had were coming from a position of strength based on that.
Yeah, exactly.
Because, you're title favorite, you're very slight title favorites, but you're still title favorites. And their title odds went down slightly today, according to BetOnline, but they're still the favorites, which is, we can debate whether that should be the case or not. Yeah. When you look at some of the other rosters around the league, but that's something that is going to, you can feel good about from top down in the organization. So I guess my next question for you is for, like, with Jaylen Brown here, I feel like he was the one you, like, if you're the Celtics, once these talks got leaked, like that's always the guy you worry about most, because that's the guy who obviously matters most to your team, the guy who's up for free agency first. We've talked, there's 1,000 reasons why he wouldn't want to leave the Celtics financially, team success wise, et cetera. But you do wonder of whether this will factor in at all in terms of making a decision a couple years down the road. How do you kind of view it from that perspective? Like, do you feel like this will just be something forgotten about next summer anyway? Or will this something that could be like, we've seen like other times where, guys feel slighted and they want to get out a couple years down the road.
Yeah, I think I think it's threefold, right? I think it's like you just said, winning is a cure-all, right? So if the Celtics win games, it's always easier to stay in a winning situation than it is to leave a team because you've got like a place to live, you got like your whole setup in that one city. It's if your team is winning, it's just easier to continue to be a part of that team. So I think that's probably something they're banking on. It's funny because like Jalen's, contract situation is coming up, but there is time, like there's plenty of time to kind of let winning be a cure-all, to let it kind of heal any hurt feelings. And I think those hurt feelings are probably mitigated somewhat by the fact that if Jaylen Brown was really on the table for Kevin Durant, I wonder if the Nets would have would they have been kind of doing all this, like reaching out, because like Jaylen Brown would have been an incredible return for Durant. But, here we are August 23, there's lots of time that this could have played out, over the rest of the summer. And Jaylen Brown is still a Celtic. Like, I do wonder if the Nets would have been a little bit more motivated to kind of keep trade conversations going if they actually thought that Jaylen was available. So I think all of it, and whether that's true or not, that's a pitch that Brad can make to Jaylen. So I think those three things can all be things that the Celtics kind of point to and say, look, we're a winning team. That was in the past. And frankly, we didn't trade you for Kevin Durant. Like, think about how much we respect you, from that perspective. I feel like that's like that's a pretty good pitch to a guy.
Yeah. And as Brad mentioned today in an interview on EI, he, this isn't new to, Jaylen has heard his name, not recently, but Kawhi Leonard, Anthony Davis, those were, and at the times the Celtics obviously held, and those were more debatable moves. We're like, oh, is Jaylen worth keeping on? Like especially for like a Kawhi situation.
Yeah.
Even though it was clear that was just for 1 year Kawhi, but we know where they got the Raptors. So but now, coming off on a finals appearance, he probably was like, the last thing I'm going to hear this summer is trade rumors. And lo and behold, one of the three best players on the planet becomes available. So that's how that goes. But I think how he kind of used it as that, whether he just uses it as fuel, whether he, just says this, the Celtics kind of make it clear, hey, this is like, these are leaks that were not true. And how much that gets bought into or not, we'll see.
Yeah. Look, I think the Celtics can kind of say the same thing to him that they've been kind of floating to the media, right? Where it's like where it's really semantics about a formal offer. They can say like, well, no, like it was a conversation and like, your name came up, but like we were never very serious about trading you. All of those things I think would sound good to a guy who's, who again, a lot of this comes down to winning, right? Like if your team is winning and your team is telling you all of these things, it sounds a lot better than if you're losing and your team is telling you those things. So I think it does kind of come down to the Celtics continuing to win and Jaylen and Jayson continuing to be like a successful partnership. But as long as that's the case, I don't know. It feels like it makes sense for that to be a much calmer piece than the Kyrie KD piece in Brooklyn.
Yeah. Looking around the East now, where do you put Kevin Durant Nets team? Like, give me your top 5 East power rankings right now. Like, do you have to see more from, this team to even put them in that category, which I think is debatable too.
It's tough because like, I think they're certainly below Boston. I think they're certainly below Milwaukee. I think Milwaukee is like that's the team to me. Like that's the team that can match and surpass the Celtics continuity in certain ways. That Giannis is Giannis. That's the team where their second best player was out when the Celtics eliminated them in 7 games. Like, yeah, they're really tough. I think Philly could have a good season if they're healthy. All that. Like I just like these teams make more sense too, right? Like Brooklyn just like. Ben Simmons, really? Like that? Like that's I like him. I think he's a really good defender, and I think there's a lot of stuff that you can do with him. But like integrating him is historically hard. So you're gonna put that guy next to Kyrie, who is whose game is great, but is also kind of historically hard to integrate. To put all these pieces together. That's a lot for a team. So I would have them probably probably fifth behind the Heat, behind those four in the Heat. And then, we'll see who makes a run. We'll see who gets better and all that. But I just, I don't believe in kind of the core trio, which is now what this team is so built around. Like Bruce Brown is gone. Like there's pieces that they really could have used who are not going to be there anymore. So
I forgot about him.
Yeah. Like he's a good player.
Right. Like he was definitely one of the most consistent players in that series, period.
He made corner threes.
Right?
Sorry, Ben.
About that.
Be Bruce Brown, you coward.
Right. And then too, like, and you're thinking about like Dragic in that series too, of like, he almost won one of those early games in the Garden for him, just like went off. And obviously he has flaws, but when he just was in that situation, I think he went off about it in the office and be like, what was going on in Brooklyn? Like guys are for themselves. So it's like, how does that, it's tough to see that kind of changing based on, the guys they brought in. I mean, I guess Royce O'Neal will be a good defender. Yeah. TJ Warren is going to be pretty much playing for his next contract. So he's going to be, I imagine, hungry for his, but, and then Steve Nash front and center of it all being like, yep, let's go guys. Everything's good.
Yeah. It's a tough pitch to say that like, they're going to be less selfish after or that like, it's going to be less like kind of me oriented or whatever you want to call it after KD spent the summer just trying to get out of there. Like, is that going to be the impetus for everybody to really come together? Like, I don't see it.
Yeah. It's a little dicey on that front, but all right, Tom, your co-host here. I'm letting you drive the truck right now. Where do you want to talk Jayson Tatum program? Do you want to talk about anything interesting you saw that Brad Stevens said today, whether about, or even Tatum's interview with Taylor Rooks? I think there was a lot of meat on that bone in there if we want to get into that.
I mean, look, I think the Tatum thing is fascinating, right? Because like I think everybody could tell he was injured, and turns out he was. Like
we had it.
Man, we all look pretty smart here saying that he was injured. I mean, look, I think people a lot of times like people want to say like, like if you talk about injuries and stuff like that, you're making excuses for teams. And I always hate that. It's like, no, I'm just like, there's reasons. Like, the Warriors won the championship for many reasons. One of them being that Steph Curry is a game-breaking basketball player. And one of them, like another reason was because the Celtics' best player was pretty injured. So, I mean, I think that's a very interesting one because I think the conversation can get kind of bogged down in people saying that like you're making excuses or whatever. But like, no, like Tatum was worn down for sure. He was tired, but he was also hurt. And like that really messes with a Celtics team that's so built around him.
100%. And I like the timing of this release though by Tatum, because to your point, if you go too close to the end of the finals, looks like an excuse.
Yeah.
This is like 2 months out, even though it was obvious, like you said, something was up. People have like the shoulder more than the wrist, but I mean, it was probably a combination of both.
Yeah.
Along with 1,000 other factors from that series. But now it's like, okay, yeah, by the by, my wrist is broken, but no excuse.
No excuses.
No excuses. So late August after you give it a 2 month window there, and you don't want to say it. If you say it in training camp, then that becomes a story of training camp, and then
you just
that's throw it in there. And I don't know. I guess Taylor Rooks just gets these guys to spill their guts. What can you say? Yeah. She just like, whether it's Jalen saying they're going to win whatever it was, 6 titles by 28, like a couple years ago. But that was a fascinating nugget. The Durant picture they talked about, I feel like that's like a non-story anyway.
Well, it is now.
It is certainly now. Now it's like not even worth talking about.
But real quick about the timing. I mean, you're so right because if that had gotten toward training camp, that and also it's like it's August. He knows that like he's just doing a podcast. He's just kind of having a conversation. Oh yeah. I mean, look, I was injured. I had all these problems, and then it's like he knows everybody's going to aggregate that. He knows that's going to be the story. Yeah, it's perfect timing. No, well done, Tatum. Your advisors are spot on.
Right. Veteran move. You already took more veteran moves on the floor and now off the floor.
That's right.
But yeah, so that's fascinating. You think, and it is. I mean, you look at the Celtics roster now. It is like they're probably gonna be coming into camp here. I don't think any real, from what I hear on Rob Williams' knee, like there's nothing. It's all you always worry about injuries to fraud, period. But there's nothing lingering from the knee situation when you have, the 2-3 months to rest the meniscus and just the bruised knee there. But with that and the depth they've kind of put together here, they're in a pretty ideal spot in terms of just being able to, play whatever hand they want in terms of each regular season night and keep these guys' minutes down a little bit more. Yeah,
and I think it's especially crucial, keeping guys' minutes down. Like, I mean, that's going to be perfect for especially like Horford, right? Like that's, they're in such a nice position where, they know they're going to have 2 high usage guys when the playoffs roll around, so they can kind of play around with that, right? Like if Jaylen needs a night off, or if Jaylen, has like a nagging injury and they just want to kind of give him a week or something like that, no problem. Brogdon, slides into the starting lineup or however they want to do it. Like there's just all kinds of nice little, roster machinations they can do here that I think are going to really benefit them, assuming another kind of longer playoff run.
Give me your full NBA offseason. Like, what's your team that like you think is going to be a little better than people expect? Like either conference. Because I feel like there's been a lot of like, it's very, you look at like making 8 playoff teams in the East. It's like, you got to leave some tough teams out there with what these crews have coming back here.
I kind of hope they don't make the playoffs, but I'm interested in Detroit. I just think like I like what they did in the draft for one thing. Love Jaden Ivey, and I just think Cade is going to be so freaking good. Like he's
the game at the Garden against the Celtics.
Oh
like when they beat them during that winning streak, you're just like the plays he's doing there. You're just like, whoa, like this is stuff you're seeing from like Paul George when he's like in year 4 or 5, as opposed to if he's doing this at the end of year 1 on that team, then it's like, look out.
I think he's a star. And I'm, like I said, I think for Detroit's sake, I kind of hope that they're bad for one more year because there's some real star power at the top of this upcoming draft class. But I think Cade might be a little too good. I think they might be okay this year.
Well, they traded Jeremy Grant.
Yeah, that's right.
Like I think they probably saw that and they're like, oh crap, we got to get what we can for these veterans right now and just
let's sign Marvin Bagley again.
Yeah, let's get Marvin Bagley. Let's
he was pretty good last year too,
right?
Honestly. Yeah.
Like, let's take some bad Knicks contracts and see turn that into roster filler. But yeah, you're right. I do think it is that's a sneaky team that like Cleveland this past year, they didn't sneak up on people, but just when the younger pieces, start clicking faster,
right?
That's where you get that kind of progression.
Right. When Evan Mobley is way better than you thought he was going to be, then all of a sudden it's like, oh, this team's kind of fun and interesting. And I think that's 100% where Detroit is headed. I think that, and most of that is due to Cade. He's a stud.
Where do you think Donovan ends up?
But shortly before we started recording, I saw the report that Danny has 2 mystery teams. I thought that was very funny. I think he's going to New York like everybody else. Yeah. I don't know. I don't think he's going to a mystery team. I think we've seen a little bit of Danny Ainge at this point to have a guess as to what's going on here. But yeah, I'll say New York.
Watching him play the game here, I just can't wait to see what he gets out of the Knicks, by holding all these other teams out there as, I think, not idle threats, but I think just a situation where hey, listen, Knicks, you guys are going to know when to come here anytime soon, and you probably aren't going to have enough assets to trade for a star once you sign RJ Barrett to his next deal. So clock's ticking. Yeah.
I mean, look, as much as people like to joke about his record, I mean, the man really doesn't lose many deals. Nope. When it comes to actual deals, the man doesn't lose many. So if you're trying to pry a genuine star away from him, good luck, buddy.
And especially when you're right, these are the type of deals where he specializes. I feel like it's just okay, we're going to enter rebuilding mode, but we don't have to enter rebuilding mode. So you really have to empty the cupboard for us. And worked out 10 years ago here, or 9 years ago here. And now Utah, I feel like is going to be in the same boat. And We've also, on top of that, just to have a bunch of useful veteran guys on the roster too that they can probably pawn off during the season as well for, decent assets too. So that's my team. Like Utah, like I'm just fascinated to see how this all ends up and turns into like the Celtics 13-14 roster, like part 2, where it's just like an absolute, or maybe it was 14-15. What was the year they made all the trades? Probably 14-15, where they like had like 1,000 trades over the course of the season.
Yeah, because they still had to unload Rondo.
Right.
In the Yep. Yeah. So yeah, no, that was because that was like the Chris Humphreys and
Gerald that was yep. Yeah. So they had so it was next year. So they had the Rondo, and then they trade for IT, but then they made like 1,000 deals in between, like the Brandon Wright deal, and they like filled off a bunch of other guys they got secondarily. So yeah,
Marcus Smart's rookie season was
right
quite the hodgepodge.
Keith Bogans, where are you?
I hope Danny can acquire 3 guys who can really look miserable holding up their Jazz jerseys, like Marshawn Brooks. Yeah.
We have to set up a 10-year anniversary for that press conference, or the pictures from that press conference.
I mean, if the Celtics social media team, free idea for the Celtics social media team. If you guys aren't like blowing out like some kind of photo of like the guys you have now, like, now versus then, whatever, then you're not doing your jobs.
Oh my God. Too good. All right. You heard it here first.
Yeah. You guys can pay us. That's
credit Tom at that Tom NBA. All right. Make sure you're following Tom. I'm sure you're already, but if you're not, at Tom_NBA, read all his stuff at Boston.com. And yeah, Tom, we got another month countdown to training camp. So get on the Pro-Am beat. Get on, like, we have to, maybe some appearances on more podcasts. We're gonna be diving deep on the aggregation front for the next month.
We certainly are. Yeah, it's man, this is gonna be tough. I tip my hat as always to Kevin Durant. I appreciate you. Please keep tweeting. Tweet something about the Celtics for us. Come on.
There you go.
Yeah.
We can do that.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks for coming on, Tom. Again, follow him at Tom_NBA, and we'll be back with you guys next week. And I don't know, Tom. We'll be making a mailbag. Send your ideas here. We're gonna need them for the next few weeks. So in the meantime, thanks for listening. Rate, review, subscribe, and we'll talk to you guys then.